This Fisherman's Wharf, with a few exceptions, is made up almost entirely with RG45, the mild steel gas welding rod. In the past, when I've made this Fisherman's Wharf, I've used some 1/4 inch wide flat material. But if I didn't have that flat material, I could do just as well with some 3/32 RG45. These are 2 3/4 inch pieces of 3/32 RG45 fused at the ends for the deck for the wharf. To get started putting the wharf together, what I've got here is 2 pieces of 1/8 inch RG45. The piece on the left is 7 inches and the piece on the right is 6 inches. And I'm raising the slats or the boards onto the 2 pieces of 1/8 inch RG45. And the reason I'm doing it this way is so that as the heat is being applied, these stay the same distance apart. So one doesn't come in or go out. So this way now I know that everything is equal distance apart. And I can start putting on the boards for the deck of the wharf. What I'm trying to do here is to position these so that they have about the same amount of distance between each of the slats or boards. And actually these could be just a little bit closer together. But I want to make sure they're not too close together, because then it becomes very difficult to get the bronze to flow down in between the boards. In this case, I've got plenty of room. As you can see, the 1/8 inch rods have maintained that same equal distance, even with all that heat that has been applied. Here on the right end, I'm going to braze 3 slats across, but these are not going to be brazed on the other end. I'm only going to braze them right here. And since they're only brazed in those 3 spots, I'm going to turn the deck or the wharf deck over and braze from the other side, just to make sure that they're on there good and solid. As you can see, I've cut the 3 sections off at an angle. For better design, rather than the dock or the wharf just ending square, just blunt, this gives a little bit more flow. For the pilings for the wharf, I used 3/16 inch RG45. But if I didn't have any 3/16 inch RG45, I would use 3 pieces of 1/8 inch RG45 and fuse them together. Now I'm heating the 3/16 inch pilings up, and I'm melting the ends so that they will be smooth. This is for the bottom of the piling, the one that will sit on a desk. And I want to make sure that there are no rough edges so they don't scratch a desk or a table. Here I have the deck resting upon a piece of steel that is 1 1/4 inches thick. In other words, the deck is raised from the welding table 1 1/4 inches. And now I'll begin melting the ends of those 1/8 inch rods so that they are not sharp. And now to apply some bronze here, just melting some bronze on that corner and positioning the 3/16 inch piling right there, heating that bronze up till it melts and attaches right to the 3/16 inch piling. And then I'll do the same on this corner. and finishing up on the end. And these are the parts that are going to go on top of the deck of the wharf. A vise, a cordless drill, and some very thin copper wire. Just twisting it up until it looks like a rope. Piece of 1/2-inch copper tubing for the bait bucket. And then this is a piece of 3/8-inch square steel. It's about 7/8 of an inch long. Has that little handle. And then the fishing pole. Fishing pole is a piece of 1/16 inch by 3.5 inches and a piece of 3/32 by 1.5 inches. For the boat that will attach to the dock, this is the permanent pattern that I have been using for years. I could make this boat out of a piece of copper, a piece of brass, a piece of stainless, a piece of sheet metal, but let's just say that I didn't have any of those. Here I'm going to use a piece of sheet metal from an old computer case. This is painted steel sheet metal, and I'll scribe around the pattern and then cut out the shapes using the aviation snips. I cut this piece out of the computer case, and as you can see, I've sanded off the paint. Now I'm going to put a daub of bronze right here, and I'll be able to take one side of the boat and braze it on. Turn it around. Now it's a little bit cumbersome because it won't balance. So I'll put this piece of steel on here to hold it down. Another drop of bronze. And I'll braze on the other side. There. Now that this is cool, you can see that I've fuse welded the bow or the front of the boat, and then these pieces on the ends, I'll trim those off with the aviation snips. I can only get in so close with the aviation snips on the back there in the stern of the boat, so I'll fill that in with brazing with bronze rod. And then to sand or grind the edges to make sure that everything is smooth. There are no sharp edges. Using a torch flame, slightly melt the edges of the sheet metal. This will do two things. It will take care of any sharp edges left over from cutting out the sheet metal with shears, and it will cause the metal to appear to be thicker than it actually is. For the seat, cut a piece of sheet metal to size, and then braze it in the boat. Dropping it down from the sides of the boat, probably about 3/8 of an inch. And now it's beginning to look like something. I'm going to braze the boat right onto that center piling. And if you'll notice, I put a daub of bronze right on the ends or the tops of all the pilings. And then to braze on the bait bucket. Onto the tackle box. And I've got the fishing pole A little knob of bronze right down on the end. And I can braze the 1/16th part of the fishing pole right onto the top of the piling. In this case, I want to just melt the bronze that I put on the top of that 3/16" piling, get it molten, and then drop that wire right onto it and let it cool. One time I had one of these boats fall off because it's only brazed at one point. So ever since then, I've used a piece of 3/32 RG45, short piece like this, put a dab of bronze on each end, and then brazed it to the piling and then to the boat. So it's unobtrusive, can't hardly even see it, and I can feel assured that the boat is not going to fall off. And now for the finishing. And this is all up to personal preference. Just make sure that everything is wire brushed and cleaned. Use a file or a grinder to take care of any rough edges. For this wharf, I finished the dock or the deck with some hunter green craft paint. Then a touch of red on the bait bucket, a little touch of red on the tackle box, then some golden rub and buff for highlights. This is the Fisherman's Wharf I did with the flat metal, and I left the dock portion just natural. Added a few red highlights on the bait bucket and the tackle box, and some touches of gold rub and buff. The point is that there are many ways to finish this type of piece, so it's all up to your preference, and you can just do a trial and error until you get what you want. For an aerosol clear spray, I generally use Krylon Crystal Clear. I went in to buy a can and they were out of the Krylon, so I picked up a can of this Rust-Oleum. I'm really impressed with this aerosol spray from Rust-Oleum. Very high gloss.